When a person starts winning, people will forget that you were a loser before you were a winner. I lost a lot before I started winning. And a lot of times I don't look like my wounds because I don't let my wounds overrepresent where I'm going. I'm gonna tell you something, when you start getting focused and you start learning where you're going, you don't worry about where you've been no more. You let that be the past because you know and you're starting to see where you're going. But if you keep focused on where you're going, you're ultimately not gonna go where you're expecting to go. Too much energy is being exerted on worrying about where you've been. You ever been around somebody and they start having a conversation about the past and you notice you start engaging in it? That person is taking you right back to your past. They're taking you right back to past.
Welcome to the Don't Let That Go Over Your Head podcast, starring Q the Boss.
Yo, 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 yo. Welcome back to another episode of Don't Let That Go Over Your Head podcast. They call me Q the Boss. I'm not gonna lie. We're in a very judgmental culture where so many people judge, but they don't know their circumstance. There was times where I was ashamed of my past because I didn't want people to judge me. And to anybody that's on my live today, have you ever been in a circumstance where you were ashamed of your past and you didn't want people to know where you've been? But I do believe that without testimony, you cannot save any lives. That everything you've seen someone going through is because of, that's the reason why they are where they are today. Everything you see in life comes full circle. There's a reasoning behind everything. Sometimes we gotta accept where we've been so we can know where we're going. A lot of people haven't accepted where they've been, so therefore they don't know where they're going. They constantly worried about what they used to do, but not seeing what they're currently doing now. We get stuck in moments, not allowing ourselves to grow. But if you've been nurtured, you giving yourself sunlight, you giving yourself water, and you planted yourself, you'll realize you'll eventually start to grow. And a lot of people aren't growing because we're fearful of leaving people behind. I suffer from phobias of survivor's remorse. I had moments where I had something called, and I want y'all to hear this good. I used to really have something called imposter syndrome, where I used to always worry about, am I really who I think I'm becoming? The more I was inspiring myself to do better, the more I was nervous of the world and how they would receive me. There was a time where I read all my comments. There was a time where I worried about who's saying what and what's saying what. But I realized that if they ain't talking about you, it's because you ain't popping. They're gonna talk about you if you start doing better. It comes with the territory of success. There is no success without hate coming with it. Jealousy, envy. You just gotta be mindful of your environment that you're in. Because people don't like you. They'll cross-reference your words. They'll make you sound like you're saying something that you're not saying. But that's what it comes with. But I'm asking, who are you to judge? There was a time where I was scared to let people know I've been incarcerated. I'm gonna go into this story. A lot of times when I come on this podcast and I talk about people behaving a certain way, I'm talking about my old self. A lot of times people don't even know I've been to prison. They don't know I'm a felon. They don't know I made poor decisions. I sold drugs. They don't know this. Because I'm gonna tell you something, when God clean you up, the people won't even remember who you are. And that's what I see that he's done to me. He's cleaned me up to the point where people believe that I've never been nowhere. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm the guy that went viral for saying I was in a prison cell with the guy Mujahid, and my arrogance almost got me hurt. I'm that guy. But a lot of times, when God cleaned things up, you look at things as no way that could have been. But some of the people you sit next to every day are the people who decided to make a conscious decision to change their life. And the sad part about being sentenced in life, sometimes the people that you care for over-sentence you. because they start looking at you for where you were, but not for where you're going. And they get complacent with where you were, but not complacent to where you're going. It takes a conscious mind to understand that there will be haters along your journey. And they're there to distract you. And the reason why they're there to distract you is because they want to steer you off course. A lot of people have been steered off course by people that say they love you. A lot of people have been steered off course by people that say they care for you. A lot of people have been steered off course by people that say they support you. But in reality, they're jealous of you being you. Because I'm going to tell you something, the worst thing you could be around is around someone that projects. You're around someone that projects their insecurities on you. You ever met somebody and they say things like in an argument and you're dating someone and they'll say something like this, Dre, ain't nobody gonna want you. But you wanted me. But you wanted me is what you say back. This is what people do because they're in fear of losing you. Insecurity comes in all shapes and sizes, all colors. We're a very insecure culture. Today we need to work on ourselves. But I'm asking everyone today, who are you to judge? Why do we cast so much judgment on others, but we don't cast the same level of judgment on ourselves? We constantly want someone to be empathetic for us, but we're not empathetic for others. I call it the highway syndrome. Look at this. Imagine driving on a highway and your car is in perfectly good condition. And when you ride past somebody, they're sitting on the side of the highway and you have no empathy for that person. But if the roles were reversed, you would want someone to pull over and help you and save you. You see that? That's what today's society is. It's all about do for me. But you shouldn't want the world to do for you what you're not willing to do for the goddamn world. This is the selfish mentality that we have. No level of empathy. We don't care about no one else but ourselves. I'm gonna tell y'all a story. There was a woman who went to church, and when she went to church, she finally said, you know what, I'm done with this church. She decided to go to the pastor. And when she went to the pastor, you know what she said to the pastor? I'm no longer attending service, pastor. The pastor said, before you decide to do that, I wanna know why. She said, the reason why I don't want to attend service no more, because every time I come here, all the people are doing is gossiping. All the people are doing is watching my man. All the people here are doing is watching how much money I tied. All they want to do is talk, 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 and more talk. At the end of the day, I don't want to be here no more, pastor. You know what the pastor said in return? He said, before you make this decision, could you do me a favor? She said, yes, I'll do the favor for you, pastor. He gave her a cup of water full to the rim and said, do me a favor, walk around this church 3 times without spilling an ounce of water. That woman walked around the church once. She walked around the church twice. She walked around the church the 3rd time. And when she walked around the 3rd time, she was so excited and ran back to the pastor and said, Pastor, I didn't spill an ounce of water. And you know what the pastor said? I didn't expect you to. He said, but let me ask you a question. She said, what? He said, when you walked around the church, did you hear anybody gossiping? She said, no. He said, when you walked around the church, you see anybody try to talk to your man? She said, no. He said, when you walked around the church, did you see anybody not tied? And she said, no. And he said, why you didn't see that? She said, because I was so focused on a cup of water, I didn't want to spill it. And he said, that's the problem. You need to be focused on God because your whole premise of life is worrying about what others are doing. You so caught up in what others are doing, you can't see what you're not doing. If you're here for a reason, the reason is God. Why are you worrying about what others aren't doing? Spend more time focusing on your creator. Because I'm gonna tell you something, life has some of the biggest distractions and a lot of people are distracted because they're watching what others aren't doing and they're not seeing themselves. That cup of water as a representation of God. Listen to this again. That cup of water is a representation of God. A lot of us are environments that are loud. They're loud. But if you cannot focus in a loud environment, you will not get to the kingdom. You got to be able to focus even in a loud environment. You can't worry about what other people are doing. You can't save people who don't want to save themselves. You can't help people who don't want to help themselves. You can't help the uneducated who don't want to be educated. Some people are content with being ignorant. Ignorance is glorified. And the moment you step out of bounds with the ignorance, you become the Uncle Tom. You become the guy that wants to be accepted by other coaches. What about being accepted by people that aren't ignorant? What about raising your standards? What about elevating your mentality? What about thinking outside the box because you realize that that box is only going to put you into a certain space? What about elevating your family? What about educating yourself? What about the humbleness and the willingness to learn more? What about becoming better? What about stepping out of the scarcity mentality? We're not going to talk about that. But we damn sure will talk about what others are doing. Girl, did you see? Yo, you heard what so-and-so did? These are very... When another person's name is on your lips, that means ain't no way you focus on your own. You can't be focused on yourself with somebody's name always on your tongue. Somebody's name is always on your tongue. I'm gonna tell you something. The other day, God said to me, why do you want to see so many more people happy? And I said, the reason why I want to see more people happy, because for the first time in my life, I'm truly happy. I learned that happiness is a conscious decision that you have to make and choose to be every single day. I woke up one day and realized that no one is supposed to make me happy. The only person that can make me happy is me. And I had to choose to make myself happy. And I had to choose to allow people around me that make me they put the I-E-R on my happy, which makes me happier. I realized that I had to allow people around me that make my happy self happier. So my friends and the people I allow around me are my I-E-R, my happier. And a lot of people don't realize that they need to control their feelings. Because again, no one is gonna fix you but you. Nobody can't do something for you that you're not willing to do for yourself. I ask this question every day, who are you to judge? We look at them women who are very promiscuous, but the unempathetic heart won't say why. We look at them young men who don't know how to be men, but the unempathetic heart won't say why. We look at the person who is struggling with depression, but the unempathetic heart won't say why. We look at the people who have suppressed feelings, right? But we won't say, the lack of empathy won't say why. Sometimes you gotta ask yourself why. Everything that glitters ain't gold, and everything that shines ain't a diamond. Behind every person, there's a story. I'll give you a story one time. Good friend of mine. And a lot of times, I tell my guys that I'm gonna have these conversations. So there's nothing hidden. We're open book over here. But anyway, he used to judge his father a lot. And his father was a heavy drinker. And one day he said to me, I can't stand him, he a bum. All my dad wanna do is drink. And I said to him, you ever talk to your dad about it? He said, I try to, but every time I try to, he's screaming all this nonsense. So I said to him, do you know that you can pass on substance abuse through your genes? He said, what do you mean by that? I said, in your gene pool, you can pass on substance abuse. He said, no, I don't agree with that. I said, one thing about people that are strong, and I can't stand about people that are strong, they always put their level of strength on everyone else. I would have never did it, but that, you just said, I would have never did it. But the world is not you. The world is not you. Somebody else get the same circumstances as you, they grieve different than you. People grieve different, right? But again, when he did his homework, when I talk about, he called me the next day, he said, yo, Q, that's crazy. And I said, what? He said, yo, my father could have got that for my grandfather because my grandfather was an alcoholic. When my grandfather came back from the military, my grandfather became an alcoholic. And I said, now we're getting somewhere. He said, yo, that's OD. And I said, in all these years, you've been so hard on him, but you didn't know that that man needed your help. Sometimes we look at things from a surface level, but we don't look a little deeper than surface. Behind every action is a reaction. People behave the way they behave because of a reason. I never woke up and found somebody that said, hey, I choose to be ignorant. These are conditions, these are behavior patterns that you learn. A lot of people learn behavior. This is why we behave the way we behave. It's a lot of people that are suppressing emotions and feelings, but they don't realize that it comes out in moments of, and when you don't have no control. That's when you see rage. I always tell my men, when a woman is complaining about a spoon, it's not the spoon that she's complaining about. It's something deeper than what we can see. And sometimes, I hate to say this, a lot of my women tend to be passive aggressive. Passive aggressive come across like this. It would have been nice if you would have got me something to eat. Men, we tend to call it sarcasm. But in the communication world, that's called passive aggressive. A lot of women are very passive aggressive. And when a woman gets extremely sarcastic to the point where we're like, damn, let me guess, you didn't give me something to eat, it's because she's been saying things for a while that you couldn't hear. Men, sometimes we gotta move without our ego. Men, sometimes we gotta leave behind our pride. A lot of us lead out with our pride and our ego. So when that woman said that extreme this time, believe you me, she might have said it small, but you didn't hear it. You ignored it. That woman came home, said something simply like, let me guess, you stayed in the room all day? That was the first time. The second time, it got diabolical. By the time she starts violating, believe you me, silent cries become loud screams. Silent cries become loud screams. Everything you see that's loud started off silent, suppressed. And this is what we need to talk about. I get people that get on this podcast and they sit and listen to me, and the only thing they want to do is rebuttal and fight me. But believe you me, I love my culture more than the average person could ever love their culture. I love who I am. And I say this with conviction. I'm a strong, powerful black man. And I'm God-fearing. But I believe that we're in a space right now that we're judging people, and a lot of people that's judging shouldn't be judging. They should not be casting stones. We gotta help our sisters and our brothers up. The other day I had a guy tell me, yo, she should have never had 6 kids. The woman has 6 kids. She should have never had 6 kids. I said, say that to God, because God gave her those babies. But if you're a real man, right, you would help her raise those babies. Play an example for her. You don't have to be with that woman to help her raise her children. Man, we gotta step up. It's already here. Hindsight is 2020. Everyone knows what you should have did after the problem happened. If I knew look, after the flood, everybody wished they would have got a goddamn life raft, right? After the rainstorm, you wish you would have went outside with an umbrella. No one knows before it happens in a lot of cases. We assume that everyone have the same level of mental fortitude and we all think the same. Everyone don't have something called advanced thinking to the point where they're like, yo, it looked like it could rain today. When the sun is out, everybody thinks it's gonna stay out. This is our mentality, guys. But I'm asking this question today. Who are you to judge? Who are you to judge? I see a lot of men talk about these women and the way they behave, but don't see that her example could have been bad. You're seeing the mothers of the mothers on TikTok. Sometimes you can see 3 generations and you can see the ratchet behavior 3 generations down. So you can't fault her for being the way she is. She don't know no better. When you look at that young woman who's looking or seeking validation from men by being intimate with them, because in a moment of intimacy, that's when she feel loved. But you know what you're gonna say? She nasty. She a hoe, she all of these things, but you're not gonna say, I need to get my sister some help. I'm gonna tell you something. To everyone that don't understand, the longer you bleed internally, the more you will bleed externally. I'm gonna tell you something. And the sad part about the internal bleeding, no one sees it, but they feel it. The more a hurt person is hurt, the more they're gonna hurt other people in society. Today, you're seeing a lot of people who are hurting others because they're hurting themselves. Self-sabotage is one of the number one factors of a person not being happy. That brother that stepped out on you might have not stepped out because of the fact that he might not feel deserving. And I want to ask everybody on my live today, have you ever been in a moment where you felt like you wasn't deserving? You felt not worthy. You felt like you just feel like giving up. We're talking logical, guys. And I want somebody on my live, yes or no, have you ever been in a moment where you felt like you weren't worthy, you weren't good enough? Because I'm going to sit here on live and say, who are you to judge? But I damn sure felt it plenty of times. I used to go in rooms with very educated people at one point to the point where I felt like I didn't belong there. I'm gonna give you a story. There was a time when I went to speak at a big engagement, and when I went to go speak at this engagement, everybody in the room had doctor this and doctor that and doctor this and doctor that. And when it was my turn to speak, and I'm the keynote speaker, I went to go speak. I'm gonna be honest with you. I called my man and said, I can't do it. My man said, what do you mean you can't do it? I said, bro, the words are not coming. He said, Q, he said, you're meant to be there. He said, you're meant to be there. I felt so scared to speak that I stayed behind the stage and I told the people, intermission, give me a second. Give me a second. Because that's how the devil attacks. He'll tell you that you're not deserving. He'll tell you you're not worthy. A sinner like you don't deserve. That's what he'll tell you. They're gonna laugh at you. He talks you out of your space because he knows your emotions, because he sees you, he watches you. He pays attention. And in that moment, I said, you know what? Call my man. I said, yo, bro, I don't think I could do it. And he said, Q, you meant to be there. There's a reason why you're there. I got on that stage after having that conversation with him. And I did the deepest in my life. And when I went on that stage, I tore it down to the point where I got a standing ovation. And then after the event's over, and we're greeting people, no one cared about Dr. So-and-so. No one cared about Dr. So-and-so. They cared about me. Because I speak from a space of experience that the average person can't say they have. I've been through a lot of trials and tribulations that I don't look like. Because when a person starts winning, people forget that you was a loser before you was a winner. Let me say that again. When a person starts winning, people will forget that you were a loser before you were a winner. I lost a lot before I started winning. And a lot of times I don't look like my wounds because I don't let my wounds overrepresent where I'm going. I'm gonna tell you something. When you start getting focused and you start learning where you're going, you don't worry about where you've been no more. You let that be the past because you know and you're starting to see where you're going. But if you keep focused on where you're going, you're ultimately not gonna go where you're expecting to go. Too much energy is being exerted on worrying about where you've been. You ever been around somebody and they start having a conversation about the past and you notice you start engaging in it? That person is taking you right back to your past. They're taking you right back to past. We're repetitional culture. We're repetitional creatures. Repetitive behaviors, repetitive decisions. But the insanity thing is doing the same thing every day, but expecting different results. I do realize that there are people who do the same thing every day, but expect a complete different result. That's crazy. Someone call in right now, 516-253-1150. It's gonna come up on the screen, 516-253-1150. 1150. Someone calling right now. When you start learning yourself, people that don't know who you are now will have a problem with accepting you. But the number one thing in life, you have to accept yourself before others can accept you. There is no way someone can accept you more than you're willing to accept yourself. No one can love you more than you're willing to love yourself. But I'm asking this question, Who are we to judge? Why are we so judgmental? Why? Right? We cast stones every day talking about they should know better. The reason why you think that person should have knew better is because you know better. And you assume based on what you know. The other day I had a conversation with a teacher, and he does a lot of work in the schools, right? Talking to young people. And what he said to me was, I don't have time to talk to older people because by that age, they're set in their ways. But I said, here's my issue with that. He said, what? I said, you assuming that every 30-year-old, every 20-year-old, every 40-year-old, every 50-year-old have the same level of experience. Someone at 20 could have been sat down and showed how to play in the stock market when someone at 50 has never been shown it. But we assume because a person is 50, they should know. And when I say that, that is so unfair, that is beyond unfair. Because it's an assumption. Just because you graduated 12th grade, your school curriculum could have been harder than my school's curriculum. That's what we don't talk about. We just assume. And we cast judgment on others. I'm so sick of the culture to the point where I realize that if you don't want to submit to society, society will ultimately cast you out. Anything that goes against the normality becomes a problem. I don't believe that a person, right, can do better in an environment that's not allowing them or accepting them doing better. I feel like you have to remove yourself from certain environments in order to elevate yourself. I feel like you need to go around new things. I feel like you need to go to new places. I think this is the problem when you don't have no experience. A lot of times, exposure leads to expansion. The mind can't expand if you're not exposed to anything other than what you know. You got to stretch your mind beyond what you've seen. You got to be willing to go to places that aren't normal to you. They make you uncomfortable. I always use this analogy. Imagine going into a room and everyone is speaking a language that you don't know. How long would you stay in this room before you get uncomfortable? In most cases, most people instantly get uncomfortable because they're speaking a language that they don't know. But if you stay in that room long enough, you will eventually start speaking a language. And success speaks a language that most people don't understand because they haven't given themselves enough time to be around successful people to learn the language of the successful. I don't fear failing anymore. I don't fear losing anymore. Because failing is a way of learning. Losing is a way of learning. There was a time where things didn't happen the way I want. I would get so frustrated to the point that I would give up on myself. You know what I can't stand? The same way people root for celebrities, if they rooted for themselves, hear that again. The way people root for celebrities, imagine if they cheered for themselves the same way. We'll root for a celebrity in a heartbeat. Get it, Beyonce? But why you don't root for yourself like that? Why? Some of us are our biggest critics, but never our biggest fans. We are our biggest critics, but never our biggest fans. We talk so much and critique ourselves so much. You have to love yourself. And some people need to sit down with their younger version of themselves and have a conversation with their young self. Here's a conversation me with my younger self right now. Little Q, you got it. Life will get hard for you. But in the same breath, you can't give up. People will cast judgment. People will throw shade. But you gotta believe that you're worthy. When you start second guessing yourself, it's because you're learning something new. I'll tell my younger self, Q, in those moments, uncomfortable moments, is because you're putting yourself into a space of growth. When you're going into these new spaces, you're gonna grow. And while you're growing, you're gonna be very uncomfortable. Little Q, don't worry about what they say about you. Don't worry about what they think about you. Love yourself. Understand that you're more than worthy. And anything you believe that you could be because I'm gonna tell you something. Confidence, cockiness, arrogance right? And definitely conceited, they're all on the same fence. Because I realized something about that term. Confidence can be misconstrued with arrogance when a person is not confident. A lot of times the people that you see, that you say are cocky, is because you haven't reached that level of confidence. Because in order for someone to be great, they have to believe they're great before they can become great. You have to believe it. No one can believe it more than you're willing to believe yourself. You have to trick yourself into a mentality of believing that you're worthy of anything that you believe you're worthy of. You have to know that you're that person. So when a man looks in the mirror and says he's him, I say, you damn right you are. When a woman looks in the mirror and say she's her, I say, you damn right you are, because you have to believe it. You cannot wait to be a millionaire to learn how to behave like a millionaire. You have to learn how to behave like a millionaire before you become a millionaire. Otherwise, you're not going to sustain anything. You're not going to sustain anything. And that's the reality. When a person is around people who haven't accepted themselves, you cannot expect them to accept you. Because I'm gonna tell you something, there are a lot of people who are in competition with people they can learn from. There are a lot of people in competition with people they can grow around. There are a lot of people in competition with people that they need to sit their behind down and shut up and listen to. I said, shut up and listen. You got to talk to that little unhumble child in you. Because a lot of times that little arrogant person is that child that you never sat in the corner and told them, sit down and listen. You might need to tell that little girl in you, close your mouth. Listen for a second. Relearn. Humble yourself. When a man talks like that to a woman, she rebels because a lot of times no man has spoken to her like that. When that man rebels, when a man talks to him like that, it's because a man has never talked to him like that. With that problem of having no fathers, you see that these people are not humble enough to hear masculine energy. Masculine energy makes you feel uncomfortable. There was a time where I went around men and they would say things that I knew was absolutely right, but I would rebel against it because I didn't know how to receive constructive criticism from a man because I didn't have a man in my home. There was a time that I would go around men and they would tell me things and I could not receive it because I could not hear it because I never had a man in my house telling me in a masculine way. Why do you think so many men want to be told in very feminine ways on things that you have to minimize and soften the blow when you tell a man something straight? Why? You need structure. Because if there's no structure, the foundation will be weak. Before, I've never seen no one build a house from the top level. You ever seen somebody build a house from the top? They start at the bottom and go up. So those people that feel like they're at the bottom, just know all you're doing is building your foundation for your structure. That's all you're doing. You're setting the foundation, right? And with the discipline, you will build a home. We got to get out our feelings. We got to get out of insecurity. We got to re-humble ourselves. We got to relearn who we are. I'm going to tell you something funny. My old nickname is not my nickname anymore. And the reason why I changed and got rid of my old nickname is because I didn't want to be attached to the behavior that that person was. So I realized that after a certain point, if your name was Man, it might be time for you to let go of Man, become Grown. I got a homeboy named Boy. And I told Boy, right? That's his nickname. His name is Boy. I told Boy, it might be time for you to let go of that name Boy and become a man. Because a lot of times we get so caught up in our old nicknames, we don't understand those attributes carry a certain mentality with it. So if your name was TT, your name don't need to be TT no more. How about you become Tiana? I know people that aren't even in the streets, but when you mention their name, they get offended. You can't even call them by their real name. You can't even call them by their real name. What, you the police? Are you kidding me? Your birth certificate says Tiana. Your birth certificate says Sean. My birth certificate says Quentin. Everybody on my live, write your first name right now. And if you're comfortable with your first name and you're comfortable with hearing your first name, write your name. Somebody said Tanisha, right? Somebody said Tanisha. What up, Tanisha? Somebody said Amy. What's going on, Amy? Somebody said Andrew. Someone said Shira. Someone said Jared. Someone said Lisa. Someone says Ebony. Listen, let's love ourselves. Because no matter what life has given you, when you get oranges, you make orange juice. When you get lemons, you make lemonade, right? We gotta learn how to forgive our younger selves for them not knowing any better. Because if you knew better, you would have did better. And a lot of times, we hold ourselves accountable for things we didn't even know no better on. I had a guy the other day tell me he got into investing at 40. And he's mad. He said, I wasted so many years. I said, bro, how are you gonna be mad at the years that's behind you when you didn't even know? You didn't know. That's like going to another country and the rules aren't the same rules here as it is there, and you've been here for 40 years, and when you go there, you don't know that this is illegal. And then when you get there, you do it, and then you get arrested for it, and then you're mad at the fact that you didn't know. You didn't know. You didn't know. You didn't know. It's okay. But we're gonna undigest all that horrible information and that horrible knowledge that we once learned. And we're gonna relearn. Because it is an art to reprogram in your mindset. It's an art. I learned how to reprogram my mind, right? Book, right? I learned how to reprogram my mind. And the reason why I had to reprogram my mind is because I learned, and it's a learned behavior. And the behaviors that I learned is what kept me caged mentally. Because some of the people, they may be free physically, but mentally, right? You see that? That's my book. It's an art to reprogramming that mindset. It's an art, right? To reprogramming the mindset. And a lot of people don't understand that you have to undigest some of the things you were taught. A lot of us don't learn that, yo, you gotta relearn. It's okay. Because a lot of us, when we graduated 12th grade, we stopped learning right there. We stopped learning. We didn't open up any new books, right? This is the book, right? It's called The Art of Reprogramming the Mindset. It's an art to this, right? But again, I had to learn what was keeping me stuck. And the one thing I think, and I want y'all to hear this good. I want you to hear this too, Dre. So Thursday night, I went out and I sat with a guy. And I want y'all to hear this good. Please listen to this good. And if y'all like what I'm about to say, I want y'all to tap the hell out of the screen, right? So Thursday night, I went out and they had an event. And the guy asked me, what was one of the hardest things you had to learn? He said, because Q, you seem like you got it all together, you know a lot. And I want you to hear this good. I said, the hardest thing I had to learn is how to keep my family together. And he looked at me and said, what? I said, I come from broken. I know how to procreate broken. I know how to make broken. I know how to break women. I know how. I learned how. I learned. I said the hardest thing I had to learn was how to keep my family together. I had to learn it. I had to learn it. He looked at me and said, what? I said, I had to learn how to keep my family together. Because when you come from broken, believe you me, you know how to make broken. You know how to create broken. You know how. It's like telling somebody from a certain culture to cook their dish. It's like telling a person from a certain culture to cook their dish. I came from a culture of broken, and I learned how to create broken. I've learned how to hurt. But the hardest thing in the process is you gotta learn how to heal. You gotta learn how to heal. You gotta learn how to heal. I'm gonna tell y'all one more story. And this is not one of my proudest moments. This is not one of my proudest moments. But I'm gonna be fair. One day, my son got me very upset, like hot. My mom was she was a yeller, which is normal in the culture, right? One day, I'm yelling at my son because he did something that got me very frustrated. I'm yelling at the top of my lungs, right? When I grew up as a kid, to try to clown you, you know what we'll say? Like if you look sad while somebody telling you about yourself, we'll simply say something like, yo, you need a hug? You need a hug? That's our way of styling you and clowning you. And I want my son to hear this. My son is here right now too. After I yelled at him, I looked at him and I said, what, you need a hug? He looked at me in my eyes and said, yes. When I said that was one of the most hurtful moments as a father, because I realized he didn't need my scrutiny. He didn't need my yelling. He didn't need my judging. He needed my love. And it took me a while to learn that. Sometimes they don't need you to yell at them, criticize them, judge them. He just needed love. Because sometimes, I hate to say this, as parents, we tend to make ourselves believe what we've been through, they're strong enough to go through what we've been through, when they didn't go through half of the things we've been through. So it took me in that moment to learn, like, yo, you gotta calm down, bro. This ain't gonna work. You can get the same conversation across by saying, bro, you hurt my feelings. I don't like this behavior. And I had to learn this, because the way we treat others is learned behavior. We come from a culture that we believe disrespecting and yelling is a normality. We come from a culture where insulting someone because of, it could be a mistake, but yet and still will insult because of the fact that that's how we were taught. First thing you say when somebody messes up, what are you, dumb? What are you, stupid? You don't think that's insulting someone? Right? But I had to learn that that's not fair, that's not right. Because I come from a culture where that's what I heard. That's what I thought was normal. But I always ask people all the time, sometimes in life, as you learn, you do better. But I can't hold myself hostage to who I was when I know where I'm going. When you get the directions, you have to accept the fact that you learned from where you've been, so you don't have to go backwards. I told my family, by all means, I don't come from a rich family, but a rich family will come from me. I refuse to allow my children to endure the same levels of trauma that I have. I refuse to not push myself to be greater when I know I have it in me. I refuse to accept mediocrity when I know I'm not mediocre. I know I'm not mediocre. As I said before, I'm him. And anyone that don't believe it, don't project yourself, how you feel about yourself onto me. I know I'm him. And I said earlier, confidence, arrogance, conceited, right? Cocky. They're all on the same fence. The only thing, it depends on your level of security. Because an insecure person will always perceive a confident person as arrogant. An insecure person will always say, you think you all of that. You have to believe you all of that to believe that you can be great. Because every person that's become great at one point sounded crazy. But people started realizing they weren't crazy when they started doing things. Me and my son used to share a room. And I want y'all to hear this. And I'm gonna go a little further back, because we're talking about who are you to judge today, right? When I came home from prison, my son was in foster care. And I realized that I had to grow up. I had to grow up. I said to myself, like, damn, he shouldn't be in this predicament because I should have never failed him. So a part of me was frustrated because I said to myself, like, damn, if I was doing what I was supposed to do as a man, my son wouldn't be in foster care, right? But as I said earlier, when God cleans you up, you assume a person's been in a position, but you don't know where they've been. So long story short, I talked to my son's caseworker. She told me what I had to do. I had to do not community service, I had to do parenting classes, and I had to take anger management classes. I said, no problem, give it to me. I would go work 12 hours, and I would drive to Nassau Community College, and I would do anger management classes, and I would also do parenting classes. I would do 1 hour and 1 hour. And I just kept doing it, right? Long story short, I promised myself that I was gonna get custody of my son. I said, by all means, I gotta get my son. I gotta get him. Fast forward, after taking these classes, when I got custody of my son, I told my son, I got us. At the time when I was getting custody of my son, I was also going through a divorce where I said I don't wanna do it anymore, right? I left the place with her, moved with my son to my mom's. At the time, I didn't know my mother was losing her home. She was losing her home. I said, damn, I leave this place, my mother losing her home, and then I get the notice that my mother has days to leave. Days. My mother got caught in that time, the early 2000s, with something called the adjustable rate, where the mortgages move with the economy based on whatever the rate is. That's how expensive your mortgage is. So your mortgage will be $2,000 this year, the next year it could jump to $3,500. It could jump to $4,000. So you could have a double mortgage the following year. Who income grows like that, but I don't know. But anyway, the house was so far underwater that we couldn't save it. So I looked at my son, I looked at my mother. Let me keep going. My son, my mother, my cousin, my brother, myself, and my little brother. It was 6 of us. I said, damn, we ain't got nowhere to go. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I said, I can't let my mother be in the streets. I can't let my son be in the streets. I gotta figure this out. I said, okay. At first, a part of me said, why is all of this pressure on me? But I'm gonna tell you something. Denzel Washington said, the chosen one that comes to change the family's lineage will always have the hardest time, will always be attacked the most, will always be judged, will always be laughed at. So I said, you know what? I got this. I got this. I have a barbershop. I moved my mom, my brother, my cousin, and my other cousin, my brother above the barbershop. I said, okay. I called one of my homeboys. I took a room in his basement. Me and my son didn't have an apartment, we had a room. I said, son, this is temporary, don't worry about it. My son used to lay on a blow-up mattress in front of my bed. And I used to look at him. And I said, this is temporary. Don't stress, don't worry, I got us. When I started saving. I said, I gotta cook for us. We wasn't eating out. Cook every day, cook. Trying to save money. I said, God, I need you more than ever. Today I need you. Fast forward. I was able to put my family in the biggest house in one of the nicest towns that I could possibly ever got us to. Because I stopped running from my responsibility. The day a human accepts responsibilities is the day they become great. When the person keeps living for pleasure and not their family, they will never become great. I ask this question all the time. Why would God bless someone who wants a big house for himself? I remember having a conversation with God, and I said, God, I want a house with a wraparound driveway. God, I want a house with big double doors. I described the exact house I wanted. When I say that, God, when I took my son and I did what I did for my mother, when I say that God increased my income, that year times 5. He 5x'd my income. 5X'd. I started making so much more money. I'm talking about money was pouring into my lap. And I started looking like, yo, this is crazy. Why is this happening for me? Then I realized when you make your purpose bigger than you, God will make it big enough for you. My purpose wasn't about me. It was about my family. So I say, you see tears, joy. Joy. Grateful. You talk to people, they assume where I'm at today, it's where I've been. But believe you me, there's a lot of chapters, a lot of people, if they were in my life, they would have gave up on. They would have quit. And I say this with conviction. When you choose to become great and you put God first, you'll realize that anything is possible. But if you're fighting against the purpose and the mission that God has for you, you'll never become great. The chosen one will always have the hardest time because you're trying to change your family's trajectory. You're trying to change their mentalities. You're trying to change their realities. You're trying to change their mindset. And I notice I get challenged a lot because I care. But now, I went from fixing my family to want to fix my family, the world. Because I realized God made the mission bigger than me. I've done what I've done for my family. Now it's my time to go change other people's families. Because I always ask this question, and I say this with confidence. If you're my brother, and I don't love you, and we got the same Father in heaven, and I can't love you, how do I expect God to love me? How? And everything you do is all about you. God will never bless you. Never. Sometimes you see people's success, and you get jealous of their success, but you don't understand that the devil gives also. The devil gives too. I know people right now who are running from their responsibilities, who are not stepping up being great fathers, who are not stepping up being great mothers, who are not stepping up being great siblings to their siblings. I know people who are running from these responsibilities, but they still want to be blessed. When you keep aborting mission, which is purpose, your purpose will never manifestate you into greatness. You're going to always run the figure eight, the eternal lap, the eternal lap. And I realize that I'm making strides now because I accepted my mission being bigger than me. The other day I'm in a shop and my son here again, I want him to hear this. I used to be a little depressed, and I'm gonna tell you why. When I started changing, I didn't have no friends. None of my original day one friends was around me anymore because they were used to my old behavior. And the people that was my old friends, they liked me for the old way I was. So I felt sad that I started getting new friends, but sometimes you missed the fact that the people that I grew up with, they weren't there anymore. So the other day, I'm sitting there looking, my friend from years ago, he just came back into my life. And we're closer as if we never, ever, ever stopped being friends. He left my town in middle school and went somewhere else. But as grown men now, it's like we never missed a beat. It's like right back to normal. So the other day he's in the shop, we gotten really close since then. Since we got back into each other's life, it's like it never happened. It's like back to normal. This is the kid I shared food with. This is the kid when my lights was off in my house. We would play freeze tag or hide and go seek in the dark. And he never made me feel like we were poor because he was just in the same circumstance. So I didn't know how bad my situation was because his situation was just as bad. So we never even knew that we had bad situations. But anyway, the other day he comes in the shop, he sits down. My son comes in the shop. He got on a suit. And I'm just staring at him. I'm like, the glory of God Only God. Because I say to myself every day, if I didn't step up when I came from prison, I don't know where this boy would be. I don't know where the hell this boy would be. And I say to myself all the time, God, thank you for planting the seed. Thank you for giving me the mental strength to persevere, to continue the journey that you have me on. Sometimes it's not easy, but every day I get up and fight. And I want to thank you for making me a warrior and understand that your family comes first. Your family comes first. For those who overvalue money and to value the things that can't go with you, because no one's going to sit there and keep talking about the money you made. When you go, they're going to remember the impact you left on them. No one's going to remember the $100 that you gave them that they spent, but they will remember the impact that you gave them. So sometimes in life, when you see people for where they are today, you got to understand where they've been. I had these conversations with a lot of people. A lot of people think that my journey started off rich and successful. I come from a single mother of 6 who struggled her whole life until I realized that the only way my mother wasn't going to struggle no more is if I had to step the hell up. Let me say that again. I come from a single mother of 6 that I realized was going to struggle her whole life unless I stepped my game up. If I didn't step my game up, my family would have struggled forever. Because some of the people that's on this live right now, who cry about their family, who complain about their lives, don't realize that you're the one that's supposed to change your family's trajectory. You're the one that's supposed to break generational curse. You're the one that's supposed to change your last name to make it have a meaning. I don't live for my first name no more. I live for my last name. I work so hard every day that I want my children to value their last name. When we was in Africa, you were son of whoever their father was, and it was a pride thing. I want my kids to be proud that I'm their father. Because there was a time in my life where I wasn't proud to be a father. But when you learn, you elevate, you grow, you fulfill your life's purpose and story. Someone call it right now before we get out of here. 516-253-1150. One more time, 516-253-1150. Listen, no matter how you look at life, there was a time where I'd be ashamed to even shed a tear. I don't care. I don't care no more. I'm so comfortable in my skin. I'm proud of who I am. I'm loving the man I'm becoming. I'm happy. For the first time in my life, I can genuinely say that I'm happy. I'm happy. And for those who aren't happy, I pray you find yourself. Because when you find yourself, you're going to realize that not being who you're meant to be were the worst days of your life. But when you start finding yourself, you're going to realize now you're going to start having the best days of your life. No more struggling. We're going to start living. No more existing. We're going to start enjoying. No more talking about what we could be. We're going to start doing. No more lying to ourselves. We're going to tell ourselves the truth. No more going around people who don't see your greatness. We're going to change our environments so we can ultimately change our mentalities. I'm going to give you that phone one more time to get it called before we go. 516-253-1150. Listen, who are you to judge? When I read some of my comments on my social media, I look at some people, they assume that this has been my whole story. But in reality, my story has been a journey, a hard journey. But the one thing I will say is, before I got here today, No matter how hard my life gets, I won't quit. No matter how much pressure I feel, I won't surrender. Because I genuinely believe this, and I want to say this before I get out of here. God gives the hardest missions to his strongest warriors. And I realized that my mission was strong because I'm a strong warrior. I'm not running from my responsibilities no more. I'm gonna change my family's life. I don't come from a rich family, but a rich family will come from me. And I'm gonna do everything it takes to put my family in a better position. Because if you don't sacrifice today, your tomorrow will never be greater. So when you look at your old self and you hold yourself hostage to where you've been, you'll never see where you're going. Because it's time someone open their eyes so they can see where they're going. Because you could be every bit of blind to life if you're not willing to open your eyes. So I'm gonna say this. No more sleeping on ourselves. No more giving up early. Today is a day of forgiveness. So I'm gonna ask you again, who are you to judge? Don't let that go over your head.